UnitedHealth Group stock is up nearly 4% today, is leading the entire sector. We're going to look at the reasons why. Some major data is coming in, and you guys are going to be very surprised. So right now, institutional ownership is still near 88%. This was what it was last spring in 2024. And we have seen the nearly 4,000 funds actually been buying. Now, a lot of this drop, and this is what I had thought, has been retail traders. A lot of this very crazy dumping, which was back in April and May, and then now we've seen after the earnings recently. So now the stock is starting to recover a little bit. Last week, could we have found bottom? It's potential. But with the last couple weeks, and actually the last couple months, we've also seen this, but UnitedHealth Group has been one of the most talked about stocks on Wall Street Bets. So are retail traders starting to come back? Are retail investors, these dividend investors that dumped, are they coming back? Because this is very promising. When the stock drops this much, you expect to see 5, maybe even 10% institutional ownership drop. But no, they have been buying. We have seen super funds buying. And in fact, out of all of the buying, their average is around $435 after I crunched a lot of these 13Fs. Now, they've also, the ones that trimmed was around $423 averages. And the sellers, of course, they've been holding a long time. Some of the sellers, $283. So I have a feeling they're the ones probably buying right now, getting back in. Now, there's this super funds, if we look at the data, right now, there's been a lot of buys. Okay, these funds, the biggest ones, they've been adding a lot. Okay, we'll keep tracking this if there's any more 13Fs coming in. This is bullish to me. So Warren Buffett is spending around $5 billion buying shares of this mystery company. So we should find out in about 48 hours. And could it be, which the rumor has been going around, people have been screwing with us, but could it be UnitedHealth Group? I think maybe. There's probably a few percent chance that it could be. It does fit a lot of its criteria, but the real people that I've been watching, a lot of other deep value investors that I, really cross paths with sometimes, have been buying. And one of the things that we want to look at is also Michael J. Burry. Now, he's also been buying a lot of puts recently. We talked about the put activity with the stock. This was what he was buying up and timed it very perfectly. But he sold around 4 of his healthcare stocks. And, Oscar Health was one of them. And could he be buying back? This is someone I'd like to see coming in. It's not like he's going to move the stock crazily, but maybe some attention can come to it. But it really does tell me that, hey, Derek, when Michael J. Burry, when I cross paths, I usually find deep value. The stock usually does good. It doesn't always mean it's going to go back to brand new highs. But with this, super funds are in it. So Michael J. Burry, it's kind of like a rounding curve, right? Just very small. We've seen some massive buys, some really big, obviously the big brokers. We've seen these big companies like BlackRock. They're going to be buying up for their clients. They're going to probably anticipate this failure to deliver they had last in April and May. Already shows you that the float is very locked up. So we'll get into the other news in a second, but I want to take a look at the technicals. Now remember, this stock has around 429 million shares, diluted shares outstanding. So when you have 89% of that float locked up, it can still dump like it did. But what I want to be looking at is there is not much, we've got a gap here. There's not much volume that actually traded in this once we get above this mark where we're at right now in the 266, 267, when we had this big volume here, when we had the earnings, and a lot of retail, I think, dumped as well. Institutions were buying, likely. So when we see the 50-day moving average, when it crosses above that 200-day moving average, so for the last few months, that's where we've had this drop since a lot of people bought that April dip and kind of got messed up because of it. It didn't find bottom yet. We recently, last week, could have found bottom. So I'm going to be looking at this golden cross opportunity. If I see this, then I know it's going to be very, very bullish. I like to see that. We also see that, back over here, when we get back into the 280s, you can actually see this is probably average where the volume gets the largest once we get back up here. But it's starting to get a lot of thin here. We've got a lot of gaps down on these areas. So I'm going to keep looking at that. Remember, technical analysis without fundamentals, it's pretty rough. It can be 50-50 out there. I will say that that it does look promising with the chart. It does look like we might actually do that. A few more days trading it where it's at. It looks like this golden cross could start to be forming, and a lot of technical traders are going to look at that. Now, a lot of new 13Fs have been coming in, and I've just been seeing massive amounts of buying. So remember, this is very, very positive. So the biggest catalyst this is where I make the most money. Whenever I find a stock that government is actually going to be putting out executive orders, the president did. This was back in May, so it had time to really settle. Now, in Switzerland, their companies were meeting with their government because there's this 39% tariff on Big Pharma right now, especially coming out of Switzerland right now. And this is going to be big because a lot of these companies, they're figuring out how they can make the deal, lower prices. And not only are a lot of these companies already saying we're going to be manufacturing soon in America, or even if they project to do this, and they also have to lower the prices immediately. That's a part of the deal. Next year, this will go up to 250%. Now, this video is going to explain everything. This was a couple months ago. This was what basically they said was going to happen right now, why it's going to happen. And this is going to be one of the biggest golden swans we've ever seen for healthcare stocks, especially insurance companies like, UnitedHealth Group. Health insurance side is going to be massive. Cost savings, 12 to 13% of their costs. Their MCR could go well under 80%, I think, with this. And this could be just an outlook projection. And the stock, I think, could gap up. If management says something like this, it's going to be a meta moment. It's going to be a Netflix moment, 2022, where you see multi gains. It doesn't mean that even in those stocks, we've had days that, weren't green, that pulled back a little bit. But long term, I think this stock could create multi-millionaires. Especially, I've seen some people in our Discord that have been buying up with me. Lots and lots of options, leaps far out. Obviously, we're still small fish, even if we're buying hundreds of these leaps far out. There are people and institutions buying hundreds of thousands of these on the daily. So as the intrinsic value goes up, these options, the stock doesn't even have to necessarily move. And I love these plays. These are plays where I make 6 figures plus very quickly. And I've been buying a bunch last week. In the Discord, we were talking about this. And with what I was buying, I'm already up a bunch on this. This is not for me to gloat. And a lot of other people are too. I think I might have found the bottom again. Now, I said, I probably wouldn't get lucky for this thing to go down to 180. So I was buying up pretty heavily last week, 234. It looked like this might have been the bottom. And I was covering the stock. So let's hear what the president has to say. Let's hear what Kennedy has to say and really paint the picture of what's going on today and why these stocks are starting to, potentially these analysts are changing their outlooks. And on the next earnings, we're going to see a really nice picture potentially with the costs.
We'll also open up America's market to safe and legal imports of affordable drugs from other countries, putting dramatic downward pressure on prices. And if necessary, we'll investigate the drug companies and will, in particular...
And they are already investigating. Remember, these companies, a lot of these are public companies. They have to pretty much comply with America. It's where most of their revenue comes from, like 2/3. They also are going to have to lower these drug prices now. It's not about just manufacturing, but they're going to be lowering these prices. They probably already are. I think I've already seen a couple companies going in crisis mode right now because of this. The stocks have already dropped a bunch when this initially came out. And any company that does make the deal, I think is going to be in favor of the U.S. government. And if they are doing bad practices, this investigation, they're going to be the ones that probably get skipped over. So they're going to do whatever they can to get these prices down. This is the most bullish thing in history, really, for these companies. These are the biggest costs ever that they've been paying. You have Americans at the most ever using medicines, paying average, I think $900+ a month for a lot of these crazy priced medicines. So let's see what else he has to say.
Investigate the countries that are doing this, and we will add it onto the price that we charge them for doing business in America. In other words, we'll add it on to tariffs if they don't do what is right, which is everybody should equalize. Everybody should pay the same price. And special interests may not like this very much, but the American people will. I am doing this for the American people. I'm doing this against the most powerful lobby in the world, probably the drug lobby, drug and pharmaceutical lobby. But it's one of the most important orders I think that's ever been signed, certainly with regard to healthcare or health. in the history of our country, and it's an honor to be a part of it. And I'd like to ask Robert F. Kennedy to say a few words, please. Thank you.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people.
And remember, this was a bipartisan, type push. People want lower drug prices. Now, if we see this really continue and, the Democrats as well start to really want to investigate these companies, they're going to make deals quick. It's not just the tariffs that are putting the pressure, but letters, these investigations potentially starting. This is going to be very bullish for stocks in the healthcare industry.
The fulcrum of Bernie Sanders runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this. Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator on Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. Some estimates 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry too. I think they gave you $100 million. But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on this side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people. We have 4.2% of the world's population. Our country represents 75% of the...
Okay, so the ball is in our court. Our country can do whatever they want to these pharmaceutical companies. And they're doing it. Right now, the tariffs are already starting 39%. That's going to be a big hit. These stocks are going to, if there's an investigation, it's going to get really ugly for a lot of these companies. They're going to want to make these deals.
Revenues for pharmaceutical companies. We spend in our country $1,126 per capita.
Even more than my estimate. Wow. $1,126.
On drugs. In Britain, they spend about $240. They spend 1/5 of what we do. And this is true across Europe. And the drug companies, Europeans, if you ask them, it made no sense what they were saying. Well, America has to pay for this innovation, or it's not going to happen. What President Trump is saying to our European partners is you got to raise the amount that you're paying for those drugs and pay for your share of the innovation. That the United States is no longer subsidizing that. If the Europeans raise the price of their drugs by just 20%, that is $10 trillion that can be spent on innovation, and the health of all people all across the globe is going to increase because we're going to have better products.
See, that's great. They just have to raise their percentage. They're basically picking up a little bit more of the bill than they were, and innovation is going to happen. And this is the great part. I think the other great thing is in other countries, there are a lot of regulations, right, with this, even though they're over there. I think coming to America, just like the nuclear industry, these companies are going to be able to get these permits a lot faster, build out for jobs. They're not under scrutiny like they used to be. It's a lot safer. Same thing with pharmaceutical industry. They come here, they're probably going to be super fast, greenlit, good to go. Bring in jobs, lower costs, make more generic drugs of the same price that's normally $10,000 a month for some of the cancer drugs. Let's bring that down to a couple hundred. And then I guarantee the insurance companies are going to be able to pay this out a lot more for their, clients, people who pay these crazy premiums. They think this is the reason why they are getting squeezed by this. When MCR goes up almost 90%, when it was well under 80, not too long ago, this is the reason why. Got to cut out those crazy prices.
So I'm just so grateful to be here today. I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime. I have a couple of kids who are Democrats, are big Bernie Sanders fans. And when I told them that this was going to happen, they had tears in their eyes because they thought this is never going to happen in our lifetime. And we finally have a president who's willing to stand up for the Americans.
Guys, this is big. This is massive. I don't think people understand. It is big. This is big. This is world changing. Okay. It's literally going to shape the history, because not only are people, I think, going to live longer because they'll get access to medicines in America for a lot better prices. Insurance companies, they're going to get a lot more people. There's like 8 to 10% of the US isn't even insured. This could lower premiums or lower the drug costs, because remember, it's not just the premiums, it's what you pay at the pharmacy. So a lot of people don't want to pay it because they're like, why am I going to get this? Because I really need medicine, but it's going to cost me 10 grand a month anyway. So when this really does change, and it can be very quickly, I think stocks like UnitedHealth Group, we could see in the multi-thousands someday. When they get their revenue 2030 over $600-700 billion, and it will. That's the thing. It will get that big, because more people are living longer. More people are fighting cancers and other diseases longer than they had 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. The percentages are a lot better. And with AI, cost cutting, that's why I think this was the meta moment. In the 234, this was when meta was at 88. And I think 3 to 5 years from now, we're going to look back at this video and say, why didn't I buy more? Now, I've been buying a bunch. I've been buying a lot. Now it's like nearly, with the gains, it's going to be over 6 figures just in options. So I think I'm not telling people to buy options, but I think even shares long-term, like there's nothing to lose. This company's not going to go bankrupt no matter what happens, even with the DOJ investigation. I think this is going to be bullish. Even if there's a fine, the outlook on the cost cuts and the premium raising is going to, bring them back to 25 to 30 billion dollars in free cash flow in the next, couple of years, maybe even sooner, maybe even the outlook for the next 12 months, if this goes into effect.
This is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation. And it's only happening because we have a president with the fortitude, the guts to stand up to the withering criticism and lobbying that's going to occur as soon as folks hear about the executive order. So on behalf of the child in Philadelphia who's got an autoimmune disease with $1,000 a month drug, or the older woman in Los Angeles who's on a blood thinner who can't afford her copay, I want to thank President Trump. God bless you for having the guts to take on this industry. Thank you, sir.
Now, to be fair, there are companies out there like Mark Cuban. His company, Cost Plus Drugs, is phenomenal for a lot of people who don't have insurance, potentially just, they go to the doctor, they get a prescription, pay out of pocket even. And Cost Plus Drugs can be like literally 90% off for a lot of these medicines. We've looked at it for my wife. Thankfully, we've got pretty good insurance, but, we've paid out of pocket. When I was in California, we were paying like 25, 30 grand a year for this. And now, there are other options when there's more generic drugs being produced. The Cost Plus Drugs has been pretty cool from what I've seen, just bringing down the cost, ridiculous amounts that people pay, obviously, and using that as well as with people, older people being able to get these drugs now. If they start dropping these prices and start bringing production here to America, it's going to be great.
Thank you very much.
So let's talk about the details a little bit. And this is primarily about equalization, as President Trump said. It's about fairness. Think of NATO as a metaphor. When President Trump said, you've got to pay a little more, so it makes sense for all of us, they came up, and the European countries contributed. The same thing we believe will happen in this situation. Most people who have thought about this process agree that it is patently unfair to tolerate the numbers that Secretary Kennedy and President Trump have reflected to you. On this chart to my left is a list of the 10 drugs that were negotiated in the IRA. Again, this is the bill, the law that regulates a negotiation process. This is the best price that was able to be obtained by the Biden administration. And if you look at these numbers, they actually reflect how much on top of the most favored nation price was being paid by the United States. So the closest to me, and Bob, you can point to the Jardinians, the closest one, 289%, the one that's closest to you. That means that we are paying in America 4 times more than that drug costs in other countries. Again, 100% is the baseline. It's 289% above that baseline. It goes all the way down to where we're paying 50% more than any other country. That's the range. And
the chart I've showed you guys, we've seen 700 to 800% more we're paying in America than other countries. That's over. That's over. That's not going to happen anymore. And if it is, the companies are probably going to be investigated. The tariffs are going to go to 250% next year. If they don't drop these prices, 250% next year, literally. So this is going to be a phenomenal outlook for healthcare companies.
As was pointed out by President Trump, half the time we're paying 3 times more than is paid in other countries. It doesn't make any sense for the system. That stated, President Trump has over and over again indicated, and Secretary Kennedy reflected as well, we want innovation. We want our technology partners doing the best they can to make the best solutions for drugs that cure as many people in America and around the world as possible. By getting our allies to pay a bit more, as they should be, and they should have for many years been doing, we'll course correct a problem that's gotten out of hand. And by doing that in a thoughtful, effective way, we're going to be able to get the pharmaceutical industry whole. Those jobs will still be here. We'll still be productive. We'll still be curing cancer and a slew of other ailments that plague humanity. America will still be the leader in this space, but we're paying the appropriate amount, the right-sized amount for those tasks. So over the next 30 days, the 4 of us up here, together with people standing in the back of this room, we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, are going to be approaching pharmaceutical companies to talk specifically about what we want the most favored nation price to be based on the best data we have. We're looking forward to a thoughtful interaction with corporate leaders, many of whom we've spoken to and in quiet will agree the system is not right the way it is. They're patriotic Americans. They want what's right. But the fact that in my lifetime, as Secretary Kennedy said, for the first time, we have a thoughtful and aggressive approach, thanks to President Trump, on taking on.
So if you know that this was literally this was back May 12th. So now think about what has been going on behind the scenes. That's why you've seen some of the pharmaceutical companies have been, they've been recovering a little bit, right? Not all of it has been on a doom and gloom for that sector. You've seen some companies really kind of start to pull back a little bit, but they have recovered a little bit. So when you start to see companies like, I really think like weight loss drugs are going to be massive for a company like UnitedHealth Group because their customers are going to live longer when they lose weight. It's plain and simple. Now, this is going to be expensive for some of these weight loss drugs for them to go big across the board for Medicare and Medicaid, but there is a program starting next year that they're going to be using these for Medicaid first, low budget people, lower income people being able to get these for a good price. And then it's going to be Medicare. So you're going to have people, when they lose this weight, a lot of their diseases are going to go away. And I think if their bill was, $500 a month for pharmaceutical drugs, we can get the weight loss drugs in there. They lose a lot of weight. They cure a lot of their high blood pressure. They cure potentially, diabetes. I've seen lots of people that cured their a lot of diseases like this. Potentially gonna cut off costs for a lot of people 90%. And if they can get these drugs in there for very cheap, these prescriptions, then it's gonna be massive for a health, care company like UnitedHealth Group. So yeah, I'm gonna be watching that 50-day moving average, trying to see if it's gonna get over obviously we want it over 200 to get that golden cross. I love the fact that that it's leading the entire sector right now. And we just got to keep an eye on institutions as maybe a couple more days. We see the last 13Fs coming in. But what's great is these big institutions have really only been buying. It's only the retail that hasn't been buying. So this is something that when I'm in a stock and I love being able to find a company where you have this massive army of super investors, you have a massive army of smart money, funds coming in. And whenever the majority of retail is the one that's been selling, that's when you can have a massive rebound, because that's really what happened with Netflix and even Meta. Their institutional ownerships stayed pretty high. Now, even those stocks had some crazier moves, like 43% drop in Netflix. Okay, that was pretty big. So what we're going to see, I think, in the future is you're going to see massive FOMO from retail coming back into the stock, and you're going to have funds that continue to add to bring down their pretty high averages for a lot of these companies. They're going to bring it down. So that's what's on my radar. Do you guys think did we find bottom at 234? I'm going to be discussing it a lot more in my Discord, especially with my plays. You can see exactly what I bought, when I bought it, when I take profits, because I've taken a lot of profits on some previous stocks that are up about 300% in the options on some energy sector plays. You've seen we've covered Centrus Energy for years on this channel. The stock's beating NVIDIA in gains recently. So that's going to be like a 25,000% gain in the last 9.5 years for that stock. So that's the type of stuff I look for. Value stocks that the market's beaten down. So if you guys like these videos, please subscribe below and go check out the Discord.